Picture this. A rock guitarist with 0 acting credits lands the lead role on what will become HBO's most expensive show ever. 3 different actresses turn down the chance to play Carrie Bradshaw before Sarah Jessica Parker ever picks up the script. 2 actresses walk into auditions for each other's parts and swap careers forever. None of these are hypotheticals. Every single one nearly happened. And if any of them had played out differently, the shows we grew up on would be unrecognizable. We're counting down 10 iconic TV roles that nearly went to completely different actors, along with the behind-the-scenes chaos that put the right people in the right chairs at the last possible second. Some of these stories are genuinely jaw-dropping, a few are hilarious, and at least one will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about your favorite show. Before we jump in, hit that like button and subscribe. You're going to want to stick around for number 1. Let's go. Number 10. Frasier, a face that launched an entire character. We're kicking things off with what might be the strangest origin story on this list, because Niles Crane didn't exist on paper when David Hyde Pierce landed the part. No script, no scenes, not a single line of dialogue. Producers sat across from Pierce and just talked 45 minutes of spitballing about what Frasier's brother might look like. Maybe a Jungian to Frasier's Freudian, that sort of thing. Pierce flew back to New York, and a few weeks later, the phone rang with an offer. His reaction? Understandably, what offer? There's nothing to accept. The whole thing started because someone on the production team noticed Pierce bore an uncanny resemblance to Kelsey Grammer. That observation, just a physical similarity, sparked the creation of an entire character who would become half the show's engine. And here's where it gets good. When Pierce finally read an actual Frasier script, his first impression landed somewhere between underwhelmed and alarmed. He felt the writers had accidentally created 2 versions of the same person. Still, he took the gig. 11 consecutive Emmy nominations for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy followed, with 4 wins scattered between 1995 and 2004. Not a bad return on a role that started as a casting director squinting at a headshot and thinking, wait, doesn't that guy look like Kelsey? Number 9. The X-Files, the PhD who almost blew it. By the early 90s, David Duchovny held a master's degree in English literature from Yale, carried a Princeton bachelor's on his resume, and couldn't book a steady job. Small film parts and guest spots kept the lights on, which meant that when the X-Files pilot script showed up, he already had a commitment, a TV movie directed by a friend. Taking Fox Mulder would mean pulling out and torching a personal relationship. Duchovny came dangerously close to walking away from the whole thing. On Rob Lowe's podcast, he reflected on how spectacularly bad actors can be at recognizing the opportunities that actually matter, and admitted he nearly proved his own theory right. What makes this even better? Creator Chris Carter spent early production convinced his lead wasn't especially bright. Duchovny's slow, deliberate speaking cadence read as dim rather than thoughtful. That assumption evaporated once Carter realized the guy delivering those dry Mulder one-liners held Ivy League degrees from 2 different schools and ranked among the best-read people Carter had ever encountered. 9 seasons, 2 feature films, and a Golden Globe later, the whole thing nearly collapsed because of a scheduling conflict with a TV movie nobody remembers the name of. Number 8. Cheers from linebacker to relief pitcher. Most fans don't realize Sam Malone started life as a completely different character. Producers built him as a retired football player, and they built him that way for one reason. Fred Dreyer, a former NFL defensive end who'd moved into acting, seemed like a lock for the part. Dreyer sat at the top of the list. Network brass floated names like Bill Cosby and William Devane as alternatives. Ed O'Neill walked in, read, and walked out without the job. John Lithgow missed his audition slot entirely, just never showed up. Everything shifted when the producers screened Ted Danson in Body Heat, where he'd played a tap-dancing lawyer with a goofy charm that shouldn't have worked but absolutely did. Series creator Glenn Charles has pointed to one specific thing that sealed the deal: Danson's chemistry with Shelley Long. Once that pairing clicked, nothing else mattered. Dreyer fell to second, then out of the picture entirely, which created a problem. You can't hand the role to a guy who looks like Ted Danson and keep calling the character a retired linebacker. Overnight, Sam "Mayday" Malone transformed from a former football player into a former Boston Red Sox relief pitcher, and Danson enrolled in bartending school to sell the rest of the illusion. 11 seasons followed. The 1993 finale pulled roughly 80 million viewers. landing it as the second most-watched series finale in television history at that point. Danson's per-episode paycheck reportedly climbed to around $450,000 by the end. Dreyer, meanwhile, popped up in 3 episodes as a sports broadcaster. Life finds a way. Number 7. Sex and the City. 3 women turned down Carrie Bradshaw before Sarah Jessica Parker ever narrated a single voiceover about love and shoes in Manhattan. 3 different actresses had the role of Carrie Bradshaw within reach, and all 3 let it go. First up, Meechin Amick. Darren Star originally envisioned the show as a spin-off vehicle built around Amick's character Carrie Fairchild from his earlier series, Central Park West. The part was essentially written for her. She declined to focus on family. Dana Delaney received the offer next. Her reason for passing carried a logic that's hard to argue with. She'd just finished Live Nude Girls and Exit to Eden back-to-back and didn't want a third project defined by its sexual content. Fair enough. What nobody could have predicted, the role she walked away from would generate 4 Golden Globes and turn its lead into one of the most recognizable women on the planet. That brought the search down to a final 2, Sarah Jessica Parker and Lisa Edelstein. Both were serious contenders, and Edelstein's involvement went beyond casual interest. She had a completed contract. The whole thing hinged on whether Parker committed. Edelstein herself has put it plainly. Either she was going to do it or she wasn't, and everything depended on Parker's decision. When Parker signed on, the door closed. Edelstein has admitted the what if stung badly enough that she couldn't bring herself to watch the show. One more wrinkle. Kristen Davis walked in to audition for Carrie. The script described the character as having the body of Heather Locklear and the mind of Dorothy Parker, and Davis, to her credit, recognized that description didn't fit her. She pivoted to Charlotte York instead and landed one of the 4 roles that would define the series. Parker took Carrie Bradshaw and ran for 6 seasons, collecting 4 Golden Globes, 2 Emmys, and 3 SAG Awards along the way. 3 actresses said no before she ever said yes, and every single one of them knows exactly what they passed on. Number 6. The Office, 35 actors, 2 Oscar nominees, and a scheduling nightmare. More than 35 actors cycled through the casting process for Michael Scott, and the names on that list read like a comedy hall of fame. Dan Aykroyd, Eugene Levy, Stephen Colbert, Patton Oswalt, Rick Moranis. Each one came and went without landing the part. Before any of them even entered the room, the role went out to Philip Seymour Hoffman and Paul Giamatti. Both declined. 2 of the most acclaimed dramatic actors of their generation looked at what would become one of the defining comedy performances of the 2000s and past. That narrowed the real fight to Steve Carell and Bob Odenkirk, and for a stretch, Odenkirk held the edge. Casting director Allison Jones later described Odenkirk's read as equally funny to Carell's just darker. Odenkirk himself has reflected on why Carell won, framing it as a fundamental difference in how audiences received them. Despite working in comedy, Odenkirk carries an earnestness that makes people search for something harder underneath, while Carell radiates a warmth that transforms Michael Scott from unbearable to oddly lovable. A logistical mess nearly derailed Carell's casting anyway. NBC had him locked into a contract for a failed sitcom called Come to Papa, and nobody could officially offer him The Office until that show died. Fox Movies chair Stacey Snider championed Carell after watching Bruce Almighty, which helped push him to the front once Come to Papa finally got the axe. Odenkirk's consolation prize turned out pretty well. Better Call Saul gave him one of the great dramatic performances of the following decade, and a 9th season cameo on The Office, playing a Michael Scott-like boss in an alternate timeline, closed the loop beautifully. Number 5. Buffy the Vampire Slayer musical chairs with a stake. Casting Buffy ranks among the most tangled personnel puzzles in 90s television, and at the center of it sit 2 actresses who essentially swap destinies. Sarah Michelle Gellar arrived carrying an Emmy from All My Children, which meant producers immediately slotted her as the Ice Queen Cordelia Chase, the popular mean girl. Gellar pushed back hard. She wanted the lead. Her demand to the producers, guarantee me a network test for Buffy or I'm not doing this. Their response, no guarantees. Gellar's counter, fine, then I'll play Cordelia. A genuine standoff with both sides dug in. Across town, Charisma Carpenter walked into her audition preparing to read for Buffy. Producers looked at her and redirected her to Cordelia on the spot. Making it all even messier, Bianca Lawson had already won the Cordelia role outright before contractual obligations forced her out. She eventually returned as the Slayer Kendra in Season 2. Geller got her Buffy test. Carpenter embraced Cordelia. And Carpenter has always spoken about the outcome with zero bitterness, publicly acknowledging she probably wasn't ready for the kind of fame that the lead role carried. 144 episodes followed, cementing the show as one of the defining cultural touchstones of the late 90s. Katie Holmes and Julie Benz both auditioned along the way. Benz landed the role of the vampire Darla instead, and Ryan Reynolds reportedly turned down a shot at Xander. Number 4. The West Wing. A different president changes everything. Aaron Sorkin offered the role of President Josiah Bartlet to Sidney Poitier. Let that land for a second. The first black man to win the Academy Award for Best Actor, playing the President of the United States on network television in 1999, 6 years before Barack Obama became a household name. A casting decision like that doesn't just change a show, it reshapes an entire cultural conversation. Talk stalled almost immediately. Sorkin himself has explained it plainly. The deal proved too expensive, and negotiations never gained traction. After Poitier, the search turned to Jason Robards, whose declining health took him out of contention. Hal Holbrook and John Cullum entered the discussion without gaining real momentum. Everything broke open when executive producer John Wells phoned Sorkin with one name, Martin Sheen. Sorkin loved working with Sheen on The American President. That part wasn't the issue. Convincing a film actor to commit to network television seemed like a long shot nobody expected to convert. Sheen signed on. And here's the detail that reveals how little anyone understood what they had. His original contract covered only a handful of episodes per season across 3 years. President Bartlet started as a background character, barely more than a recurring guest. Test audiences obliterated that plan. Their response to Sheen's performance forced producers to expand Bartlet into a full series regular. 26 Emmys followed, including 4 consecutive Outstanding Drama Series wins. Sheen collected 6 lead actor nominations. The show became the gold standard for political drama on television, anchored by a president who almost didn't exist on screen and nearly belonged to an entirely different actor. Number 3. Friends. One actress says no thanks and reshuffles an empire. The casting of Friends traces back to a single decision that rearranged everything. Téa Leoni described at the time as the next Lucille Ball topped the producer's wish list for Rachel Green. She turned it down to headline The Naked Truth instead. Elizabeth Berkley, Denise Richards, and Tiffany Amber Thiessen all read for the part without landing it. Maggie Wheeler auditioned for Rachel too, got redirected to a recurring character, and ended up creating one of the most quoted running gags in sitcom history, Janice. Courteney Cox received a direct offer for Rachel and declined not because she didn't want the show, but because she didn't want that character. Cox lobbied the producers to let her play Monica, explaining that she connected with Monica's energy in a way she never could with Rachel. She wasn't as clean as Monica, she admitted, but she recognized herself in the competitiveness, the need for control, the specific neuroses that made Monica tick. That decision cracked the door open for Jennifer Aniston, who nearly missed her chance anyway. A contract with CBS tied her to a sitcom called Muddling Through, and if that show had survived, Aniston would have been legally unavailable. She'd also turned down Saturday Night Live. Muddling Through collapsed, and Aniston stepped through. Premiere night landed on the 22nd of September 1994. First season paychecks came in at $22,500 per episode for each cast member. 10 seasons and 236 episodes later, all 6 leads had collectively bargained their way to $1 million per episode each, a number that made Aniston, Cox, and Lisa Kudrow the highest-paid television actresses in history at that point. The whole empire traces back to Courteney Cox looking at the Rachel Green breakdown and saying, "That's not me. Give me Monica." Number 2. Lost, the leading man who signed up to die. This story contains a twist that most fans have never heard, and it changes the way you think about the entire show. When J.J. Abrams wrote The Lost pilot on a famously rushed schedule in early 2004, Jack Shephard wasn't the heroic leader who would anchor 6 seasons of island mythology. Jack existed to die. Abrams conceived him as the plane's pilot, a character designed to subvert expectations by letting the audience believe they found their protagonist, then killing him off in the final 10 minutes of the premiere. Pulling off that kind of bait and switch required a face audiences would instantly trust as a leading man, someone whose death would land as a genuine shock. Abrams targeted Michael Keaton. Keaton bit immediately. On the Awards Chatter podcast, he described exactly what drew him in: the sheer audacity of killing the supposed lead before the first hour ends. That kind of structural gamble excited him. What didn't excite him? The studio's change of heart. Someone, producers, network executives, or some combination decided Jack should survive, transforming a one-episode cameo into a multi-year commitment to network television. Keaton bailed. His explanation carried the bluntness you'd expect. Committing to an hour-long TV show just didn't appeal to him. Too lazy, in his own words. Matthew Fox, who'd originally read for Sawyer, got redirected to Jack. Over 18 million viewers tuned in for the premiere. 6 seasons of mythology, debate, and obsessive fan theory followed. What haunts me about this one isn't who played Jack Fox earned every bit of that role. What haunts me is the version of Lost where Keaton stays and Jack dies in the pilot. No Jack and Kate romance. No rivalry with Sawyer. No, we have to go back. Strip that character out of the show's architecture, and you're looking at a completely different series, one we'll never get to see. Number 1. The Sopranos, a rock star, a garage audition, and the performance that changed television. Number 1. The one that still doesn't feel real. David Chase didn't want James Gandolfini for Tony Soprano. Chase wanted Steven Van Zandt, Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band guitarist, a man who had never acted professionally in his life. After watching Van Zandt induct the Rascals into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1997, Chase locked onto something in his presence: a raw charisma, a Jersey authenticity, an intensity that felt like Tony Soprano walking around in the real world. Chase cast him. Done deal. HBO killed it on the spot. Van Zandt's account of what happened next doesn't mince words. Chase handed him the lead, and HBO's response amounted to, "Have you lost your mind?" This show represents the most expensive production we've ever greenlit. And you want to stake it on someone who's never stood in front of a camera? The network refused to move forward. A search for trained actors replaced the original plan. Anthony LaPaglia expressed interest but couldn't break free from a Broadway commitment. Ray Liotta looked at the project and walked away. A multi-year television contract didn't match what he wanted. Michael Rispoli survived to the final round before producers redirected him to Jackie April Sr. Then came Gandolfini, and his audition became the stuff of legend, not because it went well, but because it fell apart. Midway through his read, Gandolfini stopped cold, told the room the work wasn't good enough, and left. He finished the audition alone, in his garage, that night. Casting director Sheila Jaffe received the tape, and something in that raw, frustrated, unpolished performance convinced David Chase he'd found his Tony. Here's the detail that ties the whole story together. The person who pointed Sheila Jaffe toward Gandolfini in the first place? Steven Van Zandt. Walking into his own HBO audition, the one that existed only because the network had vetoed his original casting, Van Zandt told Jaffe she needed to look at a guy he'd seen in True Romance. That guy turned out to be Gandolfini. Van Zandt landed the role of Silvio Dante and owned every second of it. Gandolfini became Tony Soprano and delivered what many critics still consider the single greatest performance in television drama. 3 lead actor Emmys, a Golden Globe, 6 Screen Actors Guild Awards, a per-episode salary that reportedly climbed to roughly $1 million by the final season. David Chase, speaking after Gandolfini's death in June 2013, stripped the legacy down to its simplest truth. Without Jim Gandolfini, there is no Sopranos. A rock guitarist who'd never acted pointed the casting team toward the man who would redefine what television drama could be. Nobody could have scripted that, which is exactly what makes it the greatest casting near-miss in TV history. 10 shows, 10 roles, 10 moments where a phone call, a gut feeling, a contract dispute, or a network executive's cold feet rearranged television history. Téa Leoni picks a different project. Michael Keaton doesn't feel like committing to a series. 3 actresses turn down Carrie Bradshaw before Sarah Jessica Parker ever sees the script. Aaron Sorkin can't close a deal with Sidney Poitier. A casting director squints at a headshot and notices a resemblance to Kelsey Grammer. A rock star walks into an audition and recommends the competition. These aren't just trivia answers. They're proof that the shows we built our evenings around, the ones that shaped our humor, our taste in drama, our Thursday nights and lazy Saturday reruns, were never guaranteed. They came together through accidents, arguments, and last-minute pivots that could have gone 100 different ways. Next time you rewatch your favorite show and catch yourself thinking, nobody else could have played that part, remember, somebody almost did. If this one landed for you, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me which near-miss casting surprised you the most. And if you want the sequel, covering the other 10 stories that didn't make this list, including the death threats over Battlestar Galactica and the pay equity fight that got Suzanne Summers fired from Three's Company, let me know. The research is already done. Until next time.